Hey everybody. So I'm a former sex therapist. I also was a pro drywaller for a number of years. I moonlit under Chuck Randallson. He was based out of New York. He was a New Yorkan. And, you know, we did all sorts of drywall stuff. You know, mudding, taping, you know, sawzawing the corners, you know. And on top of that, I am a former construction expert. Now, when I say former construction expert, that means I'm no longer an expert at it, but I was at one point. And a lot of people don't understand that when you moonlight under Chuck Anderson, based out of New York, it's one of the top tiers. You know, like you go like foreman and then expert. And I've been an expert. I was an expert, former expert. And so, you know, we did all sorts of construction. We did the fast type and the slow type of construction. We did the used and the semi-new construction. You know, I also litigated for a while. I still litigate. I litigated all sorts of things and types of such. And part of my duties of that were to, you know, just basically, I had to brush over, you know, all the new and the used construction in order to properly litigate, you know, the basically the whole aspect of being drywall, you know. And so there I am, you know, I'm moonlighting under Chuck Anderson. If you don't know Chuck, he's a good guy. He's old. He's an old dude, but he knew what he was doing. You know, Chuck he could walk into a room and he could spot wet drywall and dry it right out. And that's where the term drywall came from. Chuck Anderson, he deemed that what it was at the time, because all drywall up until 1992 was wet. It was all wet wall, and then it didn't have any dust at the time. And they started drying it out because the wet wall would smell and it would stink. It'd stink up a whole room, and Chuck wasn't having it. And he was like, you know what? You know, let's bake it. Let's bake it out. Let's bake it. Let's dry it up, because it's not gonna go anywhere. And so, you know, he did more of the drying part. I would do more of the litigations behind it. So when you're like a construction expert, you got to make sure that you're hitting your quotas. You know, all your quotas. You're getting your screws in. You're hammering it down. You got to hammer them all down, because if you don't, then you're just left to the wind, and all your drywall. You know, it could retention wise, it could just, you know, it could flounder. And I'm not one to let anything go to waste, you know. And so Chuck and I, we dominated New York back in the day. We had like a mob style, you know, New York drywall empire, you know. We had all the walls. They were all of them, and they were all dry. And Chuck, he was a hoot, you know. Chuck could slam. He could slam a LaCroix in one gulp. Like, he would boom, slam a LaCroix, no burps. Who doesn't burp? You know? And so, you know, on top of my many skill sets, sex expert, litigator, former construction expert, and semi-pro drywaller, you know, I'm well-rounded in the spectrum of all things congruent. So, yeah.